Thank you all for joining today. You did see that we are recording these sessions that way for the people who joined late. Or if you just want to see this interview again, we'll be posting this to the FDL Slack and also on YouTube. So people will be able to take a look at this later. I'd like to remind everyone that the wormholes are produced by Trillium Technologies. Trillium is the organization that 9 years ago, together with NASA, runs the NASA Frontier Development Lab, and with ESA, the European Space Agency, FDL Europe. The industry partners since the beginning of this private-public partnership have been Google and NVIDIA, as well as others. Been exciting work. For more information on what we're doing, you can check out fdl.ai or fdleurope.org. Trillium has a broad portfolio. They're an international team of scientists and developers and AI specialists. It's exciting to see that they are motivated by impact for human good through the application of technology. It is, in fact, a research and development organization with a focus on intelligent systems and collaborative communities for planetary stewardship, disaster response, space exploration, and human health. They have deep experiencing and developing high-performance AI systems in partnership with global space agencies, Silicon Valley tech companies, leading universities, and a community of hundreds of interdisciplinary PhDs. Well, today we are hosting very good friend, Dr. Erika Wagner. Hi, Erika. Erika joins us from Blue Origin, a space company that many of you have heard about. We're going to talk to Erika today about her role at Blue. We're going to talk about Blue. We have a whole host of things to talk about. Erika and I have known each other we were just talking about this, 15 years now. And in a few minutes, she's going to share with you how many employees there are at Blue Origin, which blew my mind because I remember when it wasn't that, and it's just very exciting. So, Erika, let's get right into it. Welcome. Oh, wait, before I do, I forgot to do a few other little things. We are going to do Q&A at the end. And the way we're going to do Q&A is in chat. We're going to ask you to ask your questions in chat. We have a lot of people. We don't have time to get to everyone's questions. So Catherine will go through, identify the questions that we're going to ask, and then she will call on you by name to come on and ask your question at that time. So you will be able to ask it, but you'll have to wait for Catherine to call on you to do so. We ask that you all keep your microphones on mute through the entire thing here today. If Catherine notices that you're not muting, she will mute you. She's good at that. Catherine is one of our project managers here at the Wormhole, and she's taking care of a lot of the back end stuff for us today. Okay, with that, we really will get into it now. So, Erika, thank you. It's so good to see your face, and we're sincerely grateful for you taking time to spend with us today, considering all the things that are going on at Blue these days. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Super excited to be here, Jonathan.
So, we really are interested in learning about some of the people that are involved in defining the new space movement, as it's been called. Now, more and more, we're starting to just refer to it as the commercial space domain. And that's a very exciting thing, especially for those of us who grew up in Gemini and Apollo and space shuttle years, to see so much happening so fast here. So if we could start by talking a little bit about your journey. We'll talk about your role at Blue here in a minute, but your journey to space. How did you even begin to think that this was a thing that you wanted to do? Because you've been doing this a very long time, space-related things. I didn't mean it like that. I'm so sorry. Yeah. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your journey to space, your personal journey.
Thanks. No, I'm super lucky just to have never grown up, really. I think that, it's true for a lot of us in the space field. And it's certainly not to gatekeep, but I think a lot of folks in the space field discover this when we're really young, that it's something we're excited about, and we have a chance to go and follow that dream. For me, I actually don't remember a time when I wasn't excited about space. The first books I remember owning were, Snoopy and Charlie Brown and questions about space and Earth. The first some of the first gifts I remember getting from my parents are a telescope and other space things. So for me, it runs really deep. When I was a kid, I had the good fortune. I grew up in Atlanta, and Huntsville, Alabama was just across the border. So I got to go there on a field trip in fourth grade, and then got to go to space camp as a kid. And I remember realizing when I walked in the door there that not only was this a place where other kids were interested in the things I was interested in, but that we were surrounded by adults who thought that this was a good thing, and believed that there was a path that we were on that could take us to jobs and lifetimes doing what we loved. So to have that kind of opportunity early on is something I think was really transformative for me. By the time I got to high school and started applying for colleges, I knew that I loved science, but I really enjoyed problem solving. And I sort of, had an opportunity in high school to go to a Society of Women Engineers event at Georgia Tech, just down the road from me. And it was where I realized that when you put those two things together, science and problem solving, that you get engineering. So I jumped down the engineering rabbit hole. Ended up with 3 degrees in engineering, biomedical engineering at Vanderbilt, aeronautics and astronautics at MIT, and then a joint program with Harvard and MIT in bioastronautics. So that was really starting to think about how these things fit together. How do we keep astronauts healthy? Some would like to joke that it was the world's smallest healthcare niche market. I said it was the world's fastest growing, but
Nice.
in either case, it was a chance to put together these things I loved in pursuit of something that mattered. And I think that that's, as I started looking in my career, the question of why do we do space became more important, because it wasn't just something that I had loved since I was a kid, but it was something that was transformative, inspirational, important to our economy, important to our nation, important to our technology, and important to building collaborations across the globe. So my time at MIT was really spent learning how to put these things together. I ended up working for a student satellite team called the Mars Gravity Biosat, and we were trying to figure out how to send mammals up to space and learn about what it would be like to live in partial gravity. It turns out we know a lot about zero G from our time on the space shuttle and the space stations. We know a lot about living in 1G because we've been doing it for most of our existence. But that curve that connects the two is still something that is a little opaque to us. And it's different from system to system, and we didn't have a lot of good data. But if we're going to go live on the surface of the moon, live on the surface of Mars, we need to understand that continuum. So that was sort of my academic basis. And through that, I ended up using this centrifuge that was at MIT. It was a spinning bed that was able to, you could sort of take a spin in the gym or a rest in 1G. And it turns out that the young grad student who had developed that was a guy by the name of Peter Diamandis. And so here I am with this guy's thesis, and Peter comes waltzing in the door, and I'm excited to meet him. He's now on the heels of founding ISU and Zero G and X Prize Foundation and all sorts of other cool things. And I got a chance to work with him as a mentor. And as I graduated, I ended up out at the X Prize Foundation for about 5 years, first running their investments in collaborations with universities, and then their portfolio in space, deep sea, high tech, and global health, which was an interesting set of things that just sort of kept me at the edge of what were the important questions going on around our world, and how do we pull the best innovators together to go chase after what could be transformative answers. So did that for about 5 years. Really loved my time there, but started to get hungry about getting back to space. That's where my passion is. It's where my heart is. And I was trying to figure out, where do I go where I can not just be catalyzing other people's solutions, but be part of the team that's building the next generation of solutions. I ended up serving on a committee for the Commercial Spaceflight Federation that was looking at these newfangled suborbital vehicles that were coming online. and what could we do with them? We knew tourism was going to be a thing, but it seemed like the vehicles were capable of so much more than that as well. And so we started looking at the science, the technology, the educational opportunities that came with these new vehicles. And that took me into the doors of Blue Origin, where I found people who were really fantastic. Everyone that I met at Blue was not just whip smart, really good at what they did, but they were the kind of people that you wanted to work with, and they were the kind of people who were doing it for what I felt were the right reasons. Um, it was a company that had deep passion and roots and funding, consistent funding, which was it's rare in the space industry. And we can talk about where that helps and later on, but also a consistent vision that was aligned with my values. So this was a company that wanted to see a future where we had someday millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And we can talk a lot about where those things come together. But when I joined the team, there was just about 170 of us. We were, everybody knew everybody. We were able to all gather in one room. Today, we are a little over 10,000. So I've been through about
10,000.
10,000 people.
How long have you been there with now?
Yeah, so it's been about 12 years. So it's 5 doublings over 12 years. I guess we're a little behind Moore's Law, but not far.
Amazing. Wonderful stuff. So tell us a little bit about let's talk about Blue for a minute and then about your role within the company. First of all, perhaps you could start by talking a little bit about Gradatom ferociter and what that means, and is it a real thing there at Blue, and why it's important.
That's a great one. Gradatom ferociter is Latin for step by step ferociously. It's the company motto. It's on we have a coat of arms, and it's on the coat of arms. But it really is a reminder to us every day that we are simultaneously doing two things. One is that we are building stepwise, starting with suborbital, moving to orbital, starting with small engines, moving to bigger engines, starting with pump fed and moving up to turbo machinery. And we are in a time and a place where time is finite, and the ferociter part is a reminder that we have to keep our foot on the gas. I think it's if you can ask anyone at Blue, and we will be forthcoming that our hardest thing that we've had is moving at speed. And we would love to be farther than we are now, but we aren't going to sacrifice quality and safety and our people to get there. So I think that what we're trying to figure out is how to hold all those things simultaneously. And you're going to see us putting our foot on the accelerator more and more and more.
Well, we're all familiar, of course, with New Glenn rockets, and then the rocket side of the business at Blue. I 8 years ago now, I think it was, I had a chance to sit in the crew capsule prototype of one and feel what that was like. And it was phenomenal. And those windows, unbelievable. That's the rocket business, which we need, right? We're not getting up there in any other fashion for now. Please tell us a little bit about that and what's going on with that, but also beyond the getting up to space, the once we're in space, because and I believe, like you, am a strong believer in let's do space to make this place that is our blue marble good for more people. We do space because we want to make it better here, the planet we evolved on. We are not going to terraform anything, anywhere, anytime soon. But we can do a lot of things, such as moving, perhaps manufacturing to space and power from space and mine space versus our ocean floor. Let's do it for that reason. And I've always been impressed that that's part of the ethos behind Blue and what it's trying to do. But you guys are taking some very specific steps towards that. Tell us a little bit about the rocket business and that image that we see behind you, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the name Blue Origin. I think you pointed out rightfully that this pale blue dot, this precious blue marble we live on, it is our origin. It's where we come from, and it will be our home for hopefully a very long time to come. So we're building the road to space and laying down the infrastructure for all the applications that space can offer to make sure that stays true. And I think that comes in a lot of different forms. So structurally, Blue has a few different sort of business units and programs. New Shepard is our suborbital launch, and you were talking about the chance to go sit in that capsule, flying everyday humans and science and art and education to the edge of space and back. New Glenn, coming online very soon, is our large orbital class launch vehicle, going to take us to the moon and Mars and anywhere else we need to go. Sort of Saturn V class launch vehicle. We have our engines team, which is building not just for us, our BE3 and BE4 and BE7 engines, but also for the industry as well. Just super excited to see our friends at ULA launching their first Vulcan rocket, and that blue glow.
Congratulations, by the way, on
Yeah,
that.
super awesome. The liquefied natural gas just happens to make a blue flame as it goes up, so we love that, and really great to see those engines flying and reducing risk for the entire industry as they go. Our lunar permanence team is working as the prime contractor for Artemis 5 and working to establish us back on the moon, but this time to stay, figuring out how do we build the infrastructure that allows the moon to become part of our ecosystem, part of our everyday life. Our in-space systems team is doing in-space mobility and our new product that we announced last year called Blue Ring, which is more than just a tug, but a very capable space bus that can take things where they need to go once they're up in space and really extending the reach of a single rocket. And then space systems development is everything else, including my favorite space station here, the Orbital Reef.
Love it.
Thinking about a future of living and working in space beyond the ISS.
Nice. And what can you imagine at Blue when you talk about something like Orbital Reef? What goes on up there?
Everything, everything and anything. I think when we talk about the next generation of space stations, the ISS has been an incredible platform, not only for science, but for international collaboration for decades now. Kids who are of drinking age have never known a time where there wasn't someone living overhead. And that's an amazing thing to say. I think that when we normalize that in their generation, and hopefully that's something that doesn't change moving forward, we continue to have a growing human presence in space. So Orbital Reef is really designed to start where the ISS is leaving off. So first of all, being a home for research for governments around the world, and making sure that we've got a place for all of our space agencies to do really good, high quality science, technology maturation, training astronauts to go to the moon and Mars and beyond, learning more about human health and biology, learning more about material science. But I think it's also what comes beyond that. So can we move from experiments and prototypes to production? We've had some really provocative things going on in fiber optic cables and 3D bioprinting and new material science and bulk metallic glasses and all sorts of cool stuff that we've really just scratched the surface on the ISS, because it was designed to be a laboratory and not a factory. So how do we take those things and scale them up? It's about how we broaden access. So it's always been, the ISS has been an incredible international collaboration, but really focused on a handful of nations. So how do we make this a place that any nation on the planet can come and be part of it? And that it's not just nation states, but also corporate researchers, educators, individuals, so that this is really a place for all of those facets of space to grow. And then I think the other thing I'm really hoping that it will be is normalizing what it means to grow space. So the architecture we've got is very expansible. So if you think about the ISS as an era where we had a handful of people living and working in space, 5, 7, sometimes 10. This starts at 10 and can go to 20, 30, 40, 50 if we've got the market to let it grow. So we're really poised on the edge of what happens as you start to have more and more people calling space home. And that's all the things that are living and working.
Nice. It's so exciting. And just looking so forward to this moving ahead with Blue. Just can't wait. Let's talk for a minute about your role at Blue in making all this happen, and perhaps even just a little bit on other roles you've had in the past at Blue, getting to where you are today.
Sure. So when I first interviewed for Blue, I interviewed to be an engineer with a little bit of a tie over to the business world. By the time I landed here, I was a business person with the ties back to the engineering world. And I think for those PhDs and postdocs out in the audience, that ability to stand with one foot in both camps has been incredibly valuable for me to be able to speak both languages and to work with our policy colleagues and work with our legal colleagues, work with our engineers, work with our science customers, and really bring all those things together. So I've sort of gotten to live at that interstitial space between domains, which I love. I started by launching our first product, our first revenue generating business at Blue, which was the payloads business on New Shepard, and getting to fly our first 150 customers. So met them, worked with them, envisioned what their payloads could be on our platform, brought them in the door, and got to see them successfully flying, which was awesome. As I came over to Orbital Reef, I took a bit of a broader view, and I lead sales and strategy for the Reef team. So really thinking about how do we build global collaborations? What is the platform that's going to serve these markets? How do we position ourselves to be the leading platform and the first platform that will be independent in space for communities like these? So that's been a really fun role. And most recently, I've been working more with our lunar team and starting to think about how do we do the same kinds of things? How do we make sure that it's not just about the rockets that we build, but it's about the things that those rockets help others to achieve?
How wonderful. Boy, that's an emerging market down the road, isn't it? And
Yeah.
beyond. How exciting for you. So what kind of challenges do you face in this role? And what are some of the challenges that Blue faces as you try to push this agenda forward?
Yeah, I think where Blue stands right now is it's a big year for us. We've got an incredible base of technology. We've got an incredible set of products. And what you're seeing is that we are returned to flight with New Shepard. So we're gearing up for our next human flight. We have our engines flying on Vulcan. We are moving towards the first New Glenn launch. And all the things that a really large class launch vehicle that's brings down the cost of access to space can let us achieve. And then we're moving very quickly towards the big competitions around global governments and what they're going to be doing next and where we position ourselves in that. So it's an exciting time. The team is really top notch, and we're excited about what that brings. I think we've got all the challenges that a fast growing company has. And like I said, I've been through 5 doublings. Blue's culture and values have stayed the same through that, which I've really appreciated. That's why I've stayed at Blue, is that the core of who we are hasn't changed a bit. But now we're trying to figure out, how do we put our foot on the accelerator? How do we move at rate? How do we really start to take the incredible factories that we've built all over the country and take those and start to be the company that we have envisioned being for so many years?
Nice. Now, you mentioned global governments. When you started at Blue, there were far fewer countries in the world that had space programs of any kind. And today it's over 75, I think.
I think
Uh,
there's over 100 members of the
oh,
U.S. Office of Outer Space Affairs now, which is
wow.
incredible to be able to say. And we've had some really fantastic conversations with some of these emerging space nations, because you have to sort of ask why, especially for a small country. Why are you investing in space when you could invest in other things? And it's really, I think, heartening to see that there's a common understanding that space allows us to be safer, more resilient, more economically powerful, uh, more prepared for what's coming in the eras of climate change, more ready to deal with, to have data that informs the decisions that we're making as a country. And I don't think it matters whether you are the US and Canada and France, or whether you're an emerging space economy. The awesome programs going on in Rwanda and Angola and Kenya and South Africa. So I think that there's this sense now that space truly is global in a way that it had aspired to be before, but was just scratching the surface.
Yeah, a resiliency to disaster. This definitely speaks to the why do space, right? Healthier agriculture. So many different domains that doing things up there. I started out in ocean science decades ago, and one of the primary reasons I started paying more attention to space was our ability to launch a thing, turn it around in low Earth orbit, and look back down at Earth at our ocean so that we can understand it better. Something we don't understand even to this day as well as we should. Space affords us an opportunity to do that, and for so very many things.
Yeah, we talk about the orbital reef as a metaphor, right? It's an ecosystem where lots of small things come together to make something that's bigger than the sum of its parts, and that has a healthy interchange and interplay between all the denizens of the reef, as Brent Sher would like to say. But I think that when we look back down at our own planet, the question is, how do we take what we can learn? And that's Earth observing satellites, it's instruments on platforms like Orbital Reef, but it's also the knowledge we're generating. What happens when you can make new drug formulations that you just cannot make in a terrestrial laboratory in the presence of gravity? When you can make new materials that give us totally new opportunities to open up technical domains, new vehicles you can build, new ways you can communicate, because we have the ability to grow these things in a more quiescent environment. So I think it's that interplay between data coming down, knowledge coming down, and eventually infrastructure that serves our planet. And I think you talked about space-based solar power. I don't think we're close to it, but I sure look forward to the day when we can leverage that incredible resource of the sun in far more scalable ways than we do today.
And that's, I believe, so important for us to, and I like you, I don't think we're close either. However, I love that you're not dismissing it, that we're saying it's something to pay attention to down the road. And what a great mindset to be able to know how much percentage of your time you should pay attention to the things that are far out, and then bring that in as you get back to the current time. Uh, so important in as we think about mindsets, especially when it comes to things like space. What do you think are some of the specific trends that fascinate you, interest you, maybe concern you with regards to commercial space? We don't have to do the concerns so much here, but if there's anything that's obvious there that you'd like to share with people, things that you wish that they would pay attention to with regards to trends in commercial space.
I'll start with the oversaturated places.
Hmm.
I think last time I saw a count, there was 127 launch vehicles in development worldwide. So to all the students out there studying aerospace, find something other than a launch vehicle to develop, please. We are oversaturating that particular market with really good talent that has so many more places it could turn its attention. So I think that's one of those ones I sort of look at and scratch my head and say, okay, we clearly don't need 127 uh, different kinds of rockets. But I think we're seeing a lot of real important investment going in right now is space sustainability. And when we look at the proliferation of objects, particularly in low Earth orbit, we are the edges of what we can manage are visible. And whether that, I think there's a lot of different approaches to that, and a lot of good young scientists and great engineers that are coming into this space. Also policymakers and the economic incentives of how do we do this? Because we've got to both reduce the amount of stuff we're putting up there that stays, right? And figure out how to do safety orbit or safe alternative orbits. I think the new data coming in about what we're seeing in our own Earth's atmosphere from re-entering satellites is something we've got to be paying attention to. But also there's really good questions of, can we take what's up there already, harvest it and put it to good use? This is one of those areas that if someone can crack the code, they will both make real money and make real impact, because we have launched plastics and metals and ceramics and solar panels and batteries and fuel tanks. There's so much infrastructure that's up there already. It's not designed today to be reused. So there's some real stepping stones to get from here to there. But whoever can crack that code, I think that's a really, really important and exciting area.
Are we imagining pick and play? These places where people go for car parts and they
Sure.
just show up at a big field and take what you need and build a thing.
Yeah, welcome to the space flea market. What do you need today?
Right.
Uh, I think various sci-fi authors have envisioned it as making radiation shielding around your habitat, as pulling things together in giant dynamic art pieces, as pulling things together for to actually reuse and refurbish the satellite infrastructure that we have in space. I don't know what the answer is yet. I just know that it's provocative and interesting.
Wonderful. Love to know that Blue is thinking about sustainability as well going forward. It's a necessary thing, and you mentioned certainly in Leo, it's a thing. However, in Geo, we can imagine in the not very distant future, it's going to be almost as big an issue for us to deal with.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite the same tenor. We're not launching as many birds up to Geo, but the real estate of Geo is a different thing than Leo. So I'm less worried about collisions there than I am about how do we maximize the utility of this really unique orbit that gives us those points of persistence above places on Earth.
Certainly. That's something I didn't want to get into today is the whole governance piece of that. But that's something we're going to have to pay attention to with over 100 countries involved in this. There's no getting around that. We will have to find ways to communicate with each other, work together. There's just no other option if we want it to go smoothly.
Yeah, and I think Europe has taken a really nice stance on this week and laying down some new regulations that say if you're going to do space business in Europe, space sustainability has to be part of how you do it. The U.S. government really starting to step into this, and the Artemis Accords being a one way of sharing those values across a set of like-minded nations. So I'm glad to see that there's the governance and policy are playing a role in this as well as science and tech.
Let's shift over for a couple minutes and talk about technologies and specifically the kinds of things that are important to Blue and the things that Blue is trying to do. Are there any emerging technologies in the space domain that you are particularly paying attention to? Certainly, there's AI, and it just is applying to everything. It has been for a very long time. It's certainly one of those long tail things that has been around for a very long time, but it's only been in the last few years that so many people have heard about it. Similar to, say, additive manufacturing or 3D printing, which was invented in 1982. But you ask people, when was that invented? And most will say, oh, I don't know, late 2000s or 2010s. Are there any up and coming things that are worth paying attention to that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah,
Come
those
on,
are
what's
two
the
great.
what's the secret technology that you have at Blue
Let me tell you. I will talk about one that's fairly new for us publicly, and that's our Blue Alchemist program. And this is a question of how do we take the resources of space and put them to use. And so the first product that we showed is some work we've been doing for taking lunar regolith and turning it into solar cells. And it's really interesting because you can take lunar regolith, basically melt it down and under high temperature processes, yield not only the silicon wafers that you need for the substrates of a solar cell, but also the metals that you need for the wires, the glass that you need for the cover slips, and start to build out. And it's really cool to think that you could take a small power source up to the moon and start to bootstrap yourself into a much bigger power architecture. So there's that piece. How do we take that technology and put it to use on the moon for sustaining lunar infrastructure and architectures? But it turns out that the same technology is also really powerful for work on the ground. That it allows you to make steel with much lower carbon footprints to do processing of outputs from mining in a way that yields sustainable products rather than polluting products. And so I think that there's some really interesting places, and for those entrepreneurs out there, if you can find these space technologies that have both a space application and a terrestrial market, that's the sweet spot. Right, because it allows you to go after multiple sources of funding. It allows you to do something that's really cool and eye-catching in space and really scalable and deeply important on the ground. And I think that duality is a precious spot.
And are you including in that this notion of making a thing in space that we can make better there than ever here on the Earth that adds so much value to it? For example, we could talk about fiber optics as one example of that. Is that what you are referring to? Not just that specific technology, but that notion.
Yeah, so I think there's both. There's things that we can harvest the resources of space and make it in space or and for space. And there's places where we can harvest the environment of space to yield products and processes that we could never do on the ground. Fiber optics is interesting. We've been the early work on that was done in I think the early 80s on parabolic vomit comet airplanes.
Mhm.
And what they found there was they were trying to figure out how to improve terrestrial processes. And they're like, oh, shoot, we found a way to do this in space, but we'll never be able to do it on Earth. Throw away that IP. And it wasn't until a few decades later that someone was looking at that research and going, oh, it turns out we actually are getting to the point where making stuff in space is possible. The costs of access are coming down. The costs of materials are coming down. The ability to scale up is finally here. We haven't yet cracked the code. I haven't yet, had my local internet provider call and say that they've got fiber optics from space that they're laying down in my neighborhood. But I think it's certainly the right questions to be asking, and I'm hopeful that this is one of those products that will be one of the pioneering ones that comes through the markets.
Nice. You can't see this right now. My laptop I'm doing this call on right now, this Zoom on. As you might remember, a little company we had called Made in Space. We did additive manufacturing on the space station and also some terrestrial work where my laptop is propped up right now from two bricks. One is made from lunar regolith simulant, and another is made from Mars regolith simulant that we created, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. So there's one particular use, not made in space, but based on made in space stuff.
And of course, Made in Space, now part of the Redwire family, Redwire part of the Orbital Reef family. These things all come full circle. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's exciting to watch it all go, although I do feel a little old sometimes when I see these things.
Young at heart,
Let's
Jenna. Young at heart.
Young at heart. Thank you, Erika. Let's talk for a minute or two before we get into the Q&A time. And I'd love to spend the remainder of our time before Q&A on this subject, and that's of education and how Blue Origin is inspiring the next generation of people, humans, because we should be focused on what are the humans are going to need in the future to realize this vision that we're talking about here today. I'm familiar with some of the things. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about Club for the Future, talk about things like postcards in space, but other things as well that that Blue is thinking about when it comes to not just inspiring, but also doing something about making sure we have the humans we're going to need in the future.
Yeah, such an important thing. So we talk about the vision at Blue being a future where someday there are millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And we talk about there being sort of three things we need to unlock, three missions that we have to get to that vision. The first is radically reducing the cost of access to space, and we're doing that with reusable rockets and really thinking about manufacturing technologies that get us there faster and cheaper. The second is figuring out how to tap into the resources of space so that we can build the road with the resources we get along the way and take advantage of all the things that we encounter. And the third is inspiring the next generation, because you don't get to millions of people living and working in space in my generation or my kids' generation or probably the generation after that. So if you're not inspiring, then we can't get where we want to go. So I actually love that at Blue Origin we encourage every single one of our employees to be out in the community working with kids of all ages and figuring out how to help achieve that as well as our technology goals. Club for the Future is our educational nonprofit. It was launched a few years ago by Jeff to do just that, to figure out how do we inspire kids to see themselves in this future and envision themselves on that road. So the very first project that Club did was called Postcards to Space. And you can go on the Club for the Future website, and it's completely free. We now have both physical and digital versions. And kids can make a piece of art that they that represents the ideal future for them. And I've seen everything from, well, the ideal future is my team's going to win the Super Bowl, to the ideal future is we're going to have O'Neill colonies in space. So, wide range of how kids envision this. But we then take those postcards, we fly them on our New Shepard rocket up to the edge of space and back, and then send them home to kids. And I can tell you, when you hand a child something that they made, that they sent to space, it flips a bit, right? It says, oh, this is something I can do. This is something that's part of my future. This is something that is part of the future I want to help create. And I think that that's super powerful. I was telling you a story earlier when my
Yes,
little
please.
was in Cub Scouts. He was probably 5 or 6 at the time. And the Cub Scouts were earning one of their merit badges and went out to go launch ST's rockets. So we're all out there, and we've got the kids in little safety glasses, and we're doing the launches. And he launches his rocket, runs out into the field, grabs it, and comes running back to his scoutmaster and says, "Hey, I need another engine." And the scoutmaster looks at him with this look. He's like, "You already flew." And my little guy says, "No, rockets are reusable. You launch, land, repeat." Which, as a mom, I'm like, yes, win. But also as, the things that we normalize for kids become the baseline for where they start to dream in the next generation, whether that's reusable rockets or space settlements, or, making the next great biomedical breakthrough in space. If we can give them the idea early that this is something that they can be a part of and a tool in their toolbox, I think it changes everything. So Club for the Future is now doing a lot of work in curriculum. There's curricula we've done with ST's Rockets, with Microsoft and their Excel team, with other organizations around the world. You can download them all. They're totally free. We offer training for teachers and other ways of getting engaged. I'll say the other piece for me is to make sure that we're reaching out to underserved communities and communities that are traditionally underrepresented in STEM and STEAM. So we do a lot of work with the great societies and organizations around this country and the world. Society of Women Engineers, NISBE, SHIP, the Brooke Owens Fellowship, the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship, Lesbians Who Tech. There's so many of them that are out there and really connecting to communities that haven't had a voice. Because if we're going to make a future of space that's millions of people, it can't all look like the Mercury 7, right? It's got to look like all of us and all of the things that we know, love, and do. So the more we can open those doors and say, hey, come on in, create that future with us, I think the better off we all are.
Yeah, we know that I say this all the time, probably too much, perhaps, that intelligence and creativity are evenly distributed amongst humans, but opportunity is not. And of course, we want to take advantage of all the intelligence and creativity that we have here as humans on this planet. That's how we're going to do this. So it's exciting that Blue is spending time doing this, and it's so inspiring, at least for me, to hear about kids who just have that mindset, who don't have that mindset of that's impossible. I shared last week when we had Steve Jurvetson on here. I stopped by his office with a 6-year-old. And Steve, of course, has this insane collection of space stuff in his office, including rocket engines from spacecraft, and very large ones at that, filling up floor to ceiling type things. And the 6-year-old had said, it's so easy to make a rocket. It's just pipes and wires. And I laughed a little and said, well, it's a little more complex than that. And we show up in Steve's office. He walks right up to one and he goes, see, it's just pipes and wires. I can do that. And how wonderful that they have that mindset of, I can. And that'll shift who I will do that for many of them. Thank goodness. Absolutely. As well. Yeah. Love it. Well, let's open the floor up for some Q&A, and we'll ask Catherine to choose some folks from our audience and have them ask their questions. Catherine, who do we have up first?
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much. And thank you, Erika. Our first question coming up is from Rebecca Dawn Jolitz. I'm wondering if she is here to voice her question.
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. So, hi, Erika. I'll read what I posted also. Thank you for your time today and answering these detailed questions, talking about Blue Origin's efforts and also talking a bit beyond rocketry, because mentioning that we've got a lot of people going into rocketry and how we have a lot more need also for the supporting infrastructure at this time and expanding that as well, especially for the ability to do in-space manufacturing. I wanted to ask you, can you speak a little bit about the infrastructure that will be needed, not just to support for LEO to lunar, but also for Mars exploration, especially given your planned launch in about 9 months, I think?
Yeah, so we're really excited to be carrying Escapade on the New Glenn, so getting important science out to Mars orbit. So super awesome work going on there. I think that when we talk about this infrastructure, it really, that gradatum ferociter philosophy we talked about earlier, I think really comes into play for me. If you just do the math, right, we can get, for every kilogram we get to the lunar surface, we can put 100 kilograms into low Earth orbit, roughly. And so when we think about the things that we do, we want to take advantage of LEO as much as we can. It is by far the most accessible, by far the quickest and easiest to get to, and by far the most economically efficient. So we're going to take that as our first big step. And we've been doing that. We've been building up the infrastructure. We've been building up the capabilities. As we get out to the lunar surface, I think one of the things NASA is starting to articulate more clearly is that the moon is a destination in its own right. It's got important science for us to do for understanding our own planet and our own solar system, but it's also an important test bed for going beyond the lunar surface. And that those moon to Mars strategies start to show us how do we mature power and comms technologies, biomedical infrastructure, exercise regimes, food growth, medical, pharmaceutical production, all the things that we're going to need for when we get further than our own backyard. So if you think of low Earth orbit as camping, camping in a tent in your living room or maybe your backyard, you can step in anytime you need something, more or less. The lunar surface is about 3 days out, so it's more like a short backpacking trip. And Mars is a classic exploratory expedition, right? You are now at least 20 minutes round trip for your radio signals in most places in this journey. You are independent of the supply chains of Earth. And so I think a lot of it becomes not about the high tech sort of sexy stuff that gets talked about in aerospace departments traditionally, but it becomes about how do we actually have a sustainable closed ecosystem that open to energy from the sun, but pretty much close to everything else, where we can live and sustain and solve problems as they appear. So I'm hopeful that we use LEO and that we use the moon as ways of learning about how do we have a food ecosystem that is sustainable and closed. I don't want to be eating a spirulina and power bars on a 2-year mission to Mars. I want to have good food, right? And I think that it's important. We've seen it's important for crew emotional and mental well-being that we have these things. Medicines are impacted by radiation. They are impacted by time. We can't even something as simple as Tylenol. If we send it out on a multiple year journey out to Mars, we can't expect that it's going to be not essentially past its expiration date. How do we leverage the tools of synthetic biology? How do we leverage the tools of modern chemistry so that we can formulate what we need to in the moment? And then how do we deal with the anomalies that arise, whether that is surgical or emotional or technical? You're going to have toilets that are far more resilient than the ones that we have in low Earth orbit today if we're going to go out on a 3-year mission. So I think all of these little things that we've had at the level of, yeah, that works for camping in the backyard, have to be matured, and our operations have to be matured to sustain those exploratory environments.
When you talk about that, thank you. Great question. What are we on the ISS? Are we 90% water closed loop right now, or is it more than that? It's about 90.
I think we're somewhere between 90 and 95%, and it's getting better. So the water we're finally, after 50 years, getting good at.
And what's the joke up there? Today's coffee is tomorrow's coffee. And it's going to have to be for these longer term things. We're going to have to figure. I'm glad you brought poop up, by the way, just because we needed to have that in the session today. But we're going to have to figure that out. You're right.
And it turns out that if we figure it out on space stations, we also can apply it back here on the ground. And whether that is, the built environment and having more closed loop, you start to look at LEED platinum buildings, and we're getting to much more closed atmospheric environments. If we're thinking about environmental sustainability, being able to take, clean water and turn it into gray water and apply it into our own local ecosystems. These kinds of things are absolutely part of how we sustain Earth if we can learn the lessons the right way.
Yeah. Catherine, another question, please.
Absolutely. And staying on a similar topic, Alder, would you like to ask your question? Alder, are you here? Oh, there we go.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
I had to swap over from my phone. Erika, this is absolutely fascinating. You definitely touched on what I was going to ask, so I'll kind of extend the question. You mentioned lunar, is it lunar permanence or lunar sustainability operations? I'm curious. So we've got things like ZBLAN, we've got things like there's amazing stuff going on in semiconductors in like a zero G environment. Do you see any activities or industries that are uniquely well suited to the lunar surface with its not quite zero G environment? Or are there questions that we still need to find?
I love this question, Alder. I think that this is an area that's somewhat uncertain. We don't have a whole lot of experience in this partial G domain, even today. In fact, one of the missions coming up on New Shepard, we are taking our crew capsule. We're using the RCS, the reaction control system thrusters, to spin the vehicle slowly so that the vehicle is a giant centrifuge. And we're going to be using that to test a number of technologies with NASA, the Space Technology Mission Directorate, to start to understand how do we take advantage of this unique environment. And it comes down to a number of different things, right? It's things like environmental control and life support. It's things like dust mitigation, ISRU, in situ resource utilization. But just to tell a quick science story, there was a really provocative study that was done at Glenn Research Center using their drop tower. They put a small centrifuge into one of their drop canisters, and they were studying combustion. And the thing that they found that they didn't expect at all was that they had dropped, they'd been doing this combustion work in 0G, they had done it on the benchtop in 1G, and they found that materials were actually more flammable in lunar and Martian G than they were in either of the other extremes. And when they started to look into the science, they realized that it was because you had these two overlapping sets of processes. You had traditional, like a normal flame, like hot air rises, because it's less dense, and you get these processes that are driven by convection. In a 0G flame, you have processes that are limited by diffusion, how much oxygen can come in through the the walls of the flame, because you don't have lighter things rising. In partial G, especially low partial G, you get both things happening. And so suddenly materials were more flammable on these planetary surfaces than they would be on the space station or on Earth. So I think we have things to still learn about how do these processes intersect, overlap, and how do we take advantage of them? I don't think we know yet.
Excellent. Thank you, Alder. Great question. Good to see you here today. Catherine, I think we have time for another question or two, please.
All right. I have a question from Chris Sarek, who unfortunately isn't able to speak the question himself, but he's calling from a hospital and would like to ask you if you think gravity-reduced environments are a good place to eventually build a retirement community, since it might be easier to walk in less gravity for older adults and mobility-impaired people. And he's thinking a rotating spacecraft at 0.8 G might work. Interesting.
I love the specificity there. It's so cool to think about what does lower gravity unlock for us. I had a chance when I was a graduate student to do an internship with the Zero Gravity Corporation that does the parabolic flights. And we were asking the question of how do we unlock 0G for a wider audience to fly and fly safely? And soon after that, Stephen Hawking came onto a 0G flight. And the grin on Stephen's face, if you've never seen it, absolutely transformative. I think that these kinds of dreams of unlocking flight for folks who have been bedbound or wheelchair bound is incredible. Groups like Astro Access doing some really amazing work right now on thinking about where do we use universal design to make sure that the next generation of spacecraft are more and more accessible to folks with a wide range of abilities. Turning space into a retirement community, hard. right? We know that space is hard on the human body. We see muscle loss of upwards of 40%. We see bone loss that is 10 times more accelerated than an elderly woman with osteoporosis, even in our healthy male astronauts exercising an hour every day. We see all sorts of challenges with circulation and vision and other subsystems in the body. So I think that it's hard to think of how do we use space to optimize for human health. But maybe what you're proposing is the right answer, right? If we can find a balance between 0 and 1, and we are making it easier for those with bad knees and bad backs to get around, we are making it mobility more feasible. Maybe there's a sweet spot there, and certainly I can imagine. And this is not me speaking for Blue. This is just Erika imagining for the future sci-fi books out there that retirement communities or what do we think of for end of life care. I would love nothing more than to be able to take my last breaths looking back down at our own home planet. And the concerns around human health don't really matter at that point in life. So I think that there are dreams and visions maybe that we find a place there.
Excellent question. Thank you, Catherine, for reading that. And one of the things we work on at FDL is human health in space. And I think you touched on just really a tiny number of the things that we're challenged with regards to long-term time in space. So super important for us to figure this out, not only for what we can make better for people down here, but just so that we can actually do the things that we want to do, such as extended missions to the moon and Mars, or just even in low Earth orbit. These are, we have things to figure out yet.
There's so much more ahead of us, Jonathan. I think that's what's exciting, is that
it is.
Right now, this generation is the one that is opening up space for all of us. I really, truly do believe that we are turning the corner right now from space being for the few to space being for the many. And whether that is going or that is data impacting our daily lives, I think space is now permanently woven into the fabric of our economy and of our future. So let's go do it. I think that good autumn for Rossiter. Let's be for Rossiter about it and bring everyone along with us on the ride.
I hope that we've convinced other people today to proceed step by step ferociously as we move towards this. Thank you. We're out of time today. I'm sorry we don't have time for other questions today. We will, I think we share all the questions that people asked when we share this online, so that at least you can see the things that people are asking. Everyone will have a chance to do that. Erika, thank you so much. It's always so pleasant to spend time with you. Thank you. We are all grateful. Everyone here is grateful today for you taking some time out to do this and share your thoughts. And we look forward to catching up with you in the future. Perhaps we'll do an interview like this with you from Orbital Reef at some point.
I'm in, Jonathan. Count me in.
Okay, good deal. Thank you. And thank all of you who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this and had a good time today. We'll be doing more of these wormholes, and we'll do some as series and some as individual wormhole interviews. The best way probably to find out more about them is visit fdl.ai and fdleurope.org and sign up for the newsletters so that you will receive information about it. Or you could follow FDL, Frontier Development Lab, or Frontier Development Lab Europe, or both on LinkedIn. You could follow Trillium on LinkedIn. I recommend you follow Blue Origin on LinkedIn if you're not doing that already, because there is always interesting stuff coming out from them. Feel free to follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. These are all great ways to stay in touch, to stay up to speed on some of the things that are going on today. With that, we'll wrap it up today, say goodbye to you all, and look forward to seeing you soon. We don't have a wormhole scheduled yet, but stay tuned in the ways I just asked you to, so that you'll know what's coming up. We have lots of ideas and we're working on getting them scheduled. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Erika. Bye, everyone.